Wine was curled up on the couch, her eyes growing heavier with each passing moment. As she waited for him, before she realized it, sleep had claimed her. Suddenly, the sound of the door unlocking jolted her awake. She sat upright, blinking away the drowsiness, as a tall, cold faced man stepped into the room. His sharp gaze briefly swept over her before he walked toward the couch, his presence filling the quiet living room. You are still here. Jungkook's deep voice cut through the silence as he sat down, loosening his tie with one hand. Wine quickly stood, brushing her hands against her dress to smooth it out. I was waiting for you, she mumbled, grabbing his briefcase from the floor where he had set it. He gave a faint scoff, leaning back against the couch. You didn't have to. Ignoring his dismissive tone, she hurried toward the kitchen. Her heart raced as she filled a glass with water. Trying to calm herself, returning to him, she gently placed the glass in his hand. Here, she said softly. Jungkook took the glass without looking at her, taking a long gulp before placing it on the table. He stood abruptly, adjusting his jacket. Don't wait for me next time. He muttered coldly, walking past her toward his room without another glance. Wine stood there, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, watching his retreating figure disappear down the hall. Wine stepped into the room, and as her eyes landed on Jungkook, her breath catch. He was standing with his back to her, his shirt half off, revealing the broad expanse of his back. The sight made her heart race, but she quickly cleared her throat to mask her discomfort. Dinner, she stammered, her voice barely audible. As she shifted awkwardly on her feet, Jungkook didn't respond immediately. His fingers worked with swift precision to unbutton his shirt, his focus solely on the task at hand. Without looking back, he spoke coldly. I already ate, didn't you? Wine's cheeks flushed slightly, her gaze falling to the floor. I was waiting for you, she murmured, but never mind. You should sleep, you must be tired. She turned to leave, heading for the bathroom. After a quick shower and changing into her nightdress, Wine returned to find Jungkook on the couch. A tray full of food was set in front of him. Her cooking, it was no surprise she was used to this by now. He never ate with her. But he always made sure she didn't go to bed hungry. Sighing softly, Wine sat beside him. Picking up a spoon, she took a small bite, then held it out toward him. Jungkook's cold gaze met hers as he started to speak. I told you I already had. Before he could finish, Wine quickly shoved the spoon into his mouth. His expression remained unchanged as he chewed, but there was an odd, quiet pause in the air. Wine smiled softly, her eyes shining with a gentle warmth. Let's eat together. After dinner, they both quietly settled into bed. Wine was laying on her side, scrolling through her phone, while Jungkook lay with his back to her. Already lost in sleep, the room was quiet except for the soft hum of her phone screen. As she checked the time, half an hour had passed. Slowly, Wine glanced over at him, her heart skipping a beat when she saw his face now facing her. He was still asleep, his features relaxed in the quiet of the night. She gently turned off her phone, her breath catching as she gazed at him. For a moment, she couldn't help but admire his handsome face, the sharp lines of his jaw, and the softness around his lips. With a soft sigh, she leaned over and his forehead tenderly. Wine whispered to herself, her voice barely audible in the stillness of the room. Why are you so cold, my handsome husband? I hope one day you will realize just how much your wife loves you. Then nestled close to him, wrapping her arms around him in a gentle hug. Her face rested against his chest, the steady beat of his heart, the only sound she could hear as she closed her eyes. But just as sleep began to take over, she felt his arms tighten around her waist. Pulling her even closer, his eyes opened just slightly, and with a soft, secure motion, he hugged her tighter, holding her close against him. When Wine woke up, she found the bed empty, a frown tugged at her lips as she murmured to herself. I think he left. She glanced at the time on her phone, 9:35 a.m. Sighing softly, she stretched and got up to begin her morning routine. Today she had a plan. I will give him a surprise. She whispered to herself, determination in her voice. She spent the next hour preparing his favorite dish, carefully packing it into a container before heading to her room to get ready. Once she was dressed, Wine made her way to his office. When she entered the building, the receptionist looked at her curiously. Who are you, miss? Wine smiled politely. I want to meet Mr. John. Okay, but he is currently in a meeting. As they were speaking, a familiar face appeared in the doorway. Minho, Jungkook's assistant. Oh, hello, Mrs. Jeon. What are you doing here? Wine hesitated for a moment, then replied, I just wanted to give him lunch. The receptionist's eyes widened slightly as she realized who Wine was. Minho, seeing her expression, gave a small note. Follow me, Mrs. Jeon. Minho led Wine to Jungkook's cabin. Mr. Jeon is in a meeting, but you can wait here. Wine nodded and entered, setting the lunch container down on the table. She glanced around the cabin, which was decorated in sleek modern style, with a large desk and an expensive view from the window. Wow, it's beautiful. She walked over and sat in Jungkook's comfortable chair, waiting patiently for him to finish his meeting. As she waited, she felt herself growing tired and rested her head on the desk, falling into a light sleep. Wine stirred lightly, her head still resting on the desk as she drifted in and out from her sleep. The quiet hum of the room was suddenly interrupted by a sharp, rude tug at her shoulder. Her eyes fluttered open in confusion, and she found herself staring at a strikingly beautiful woman. The woman, Olivia, had a sharp jawline, perfectly applied makeup, and a polished air about her. But her revealing outfit, which clung provocatively to her figure sent a clear and unsettling message. Who are you? She snapped, crossing her arms as he eyed Wine with contempt. Wine stood up quickly, startled by the abruptness of the stranger's tone. I am waiting for my husband. He told me to. Olivia let out a cold laugh, cutting her off mid sentence. Husband, you don't make me laugh. A plain girl like you. What are you even doing in this office? Who let you in here? Winefred carried nervously, trying to keep her composure. I don't mean any trouble. I was just. Olivia stepped closer, her heels clicking against the polished floor. No trouble. Girls like you are trouble. Let me guess, you are hoping to cling to someone rich, thinking you will be set for life. Wine's hands balled into fists at her sides, but she didn't want to escalate the situation. I'm not what you think I am. Please just. Olivia scoffed, cutting her off again. Look at you, simple clothes, a shy little mouse trying to act important. You don't belong here. Do yourself a favor and leave before someone laughs at you. Wine bit her lip, her voice trembling as she tried to defend herself. I told you, I'm waiting for my husband. Olivia's eyes narrowed dangerously. Stop saying that. Jungkook would never look at someone like you, let alone marry you. Wine's heart sank at the mention of his name. It was clear Olivia knew Jungkook personally, and the venom in her words stung. Believe what you want, but I'm not lying. Olivia's patience snapped without warning. She raised her hand and slapped one across the face, the sound echoing in the room. How dare you talk back to me? She hissed. Wine stumbled back, her cheek burning. But she steadied herself, refusing to let tears fall. You don't have the right to treat me like this. Olivia grabbed her arm roughly and started dragging her toward the door. I have every right to kick you out of here. Girls like you have no place in Jungkook's life. And I will make sure you learn that lesson today. Wine struggled against her grip, but Olivia was relentless, yanking the door open with one swift motion. She pushed Wine hard, sending her stumbling forward. Before Wine could fall, she felt strong arms catch her from behind. She gasped and looked up to see Jungkook's cold, piercing eyes glaring over her shoulder. What's going on here? Jungkook's jaw ticked as he looked in Wine's trembling form and the angry red mark marring her cheek. His eyes flared with barely contained rage. He gently turned Wine's face toward him, his fingers brushing over the mark as if to soothe the sting. Who did this? His voice was low, menacing, and dangerous. Wine opened her mouth to respond. But her hesitant glance toward Olivia betrayed the truth. Jungkook's eyes immediately snapped to Olivia, who stood frozen, her confidence quickly crumbling under his glare. I didn't mean to, boss. She was just sitting there, acting like she owns the place, and saying she is your wife. Jungkook's lips curled into a cold, humorless smile, saying she doesn't need to say it, she is my wife. Olivia's eyes widened in shock, her composure faltering further. Boss, you can't be serious. Her, look at her. She gestured dismissively toward wine, her tone dripping with disdain. She's so basic, she doesn't belong here. Jungkook took a deliberate step toward Olivia, his presence towering and suffocating. Basic, that's rich coming from you. Olivia, you think reveling dresses and spreading your legs for power make you special? Olivia gasped, her face reddening in a mix of anger and humiliation. Boss, I have been loyal to you. I have done everything you have asked. Jungkook cut her off with a sharp laugh, his voice dripping with venom. Loyal, don't make me laugh. If this is what you call loyalty, then I would rather deal with a snake. At least a snake doesn't pretend to be anything else. Olivia's lip trembled and she stumbled over her words. I was just trying to protect you, boss. She's lying, trying to take advantage of you. Jungkook's eyes darkened further and he took another step closer. His voice dropping to an icy whisper. Protect me, you slapped my wife. He pointed to Wine, who was still holding her cheek. You dare to lay a hand on her. Olivia tried to defend herself, her voice shaky. I didn't mean it like that. She provoked me, boss. Jungkook didn't let her finish. His hand shot out, grabbing a fistful of her hair and yanking her head back. Olivia let out a gasp, her eyes filling with fear. Listen to me. I have never laid a finger on my wife, and you? He leaned in closer, his voice like ice. You slapped her. Olivia whimpered, her bravado completely shattered. Boss, please, I didn't mean to. Without hesitation, he raised his hand and slapped Olivia hard across the face. The sound echoed through the room, and Olivia stumbled back, clutching her cheek in shock. Boss, please, I'm your secretary. Not anymore. You are done here. Pack your stuff and get the out of my company. Olivia tried one last time to act innocent, her voice trembling. I didn't mean to hurt her, boss. She's not right for you. Jungkook's voice was sharp as a blade cutting through her words. Say one more word about my wife, and I will make sure you don't just lose your job, you will lose everything. He released her, letting her stumble backward and turn back to Wine. His expression softened as he cupped her cheek gently, brushing his thumb over the mark Olivia had left. Are you okay? Wine nodded hesitantly, her voice trembling. I'm fine. Jungkook exhaled, his hand lingering on her cheek. Before he pulled away, turning back to Olivia, he delivered one last command. Get out before I change my mind and ruin you right here. Olivia glared at Wine one last time before storming out. Slamming the door behind her, Jungkook sighed heavily, his hands falling to his sides as he turned back to Wine. You didn't deserve that. I'm sorry. Wine shook her head, quickly her voice soft. You don't need to apologize. Thank you for standing up for me. Jungkook brought Wine home in silence, his jaw tight with lingering anger. When they entered the room, he guided her gently to the bed and sat down, pulling her onto his lap. Wine hesitated, her cheeks flushing crimson as her legs instinctively wrapped around his waist. Jungkook, she whispered shyly, her hands resting awkwardly on his shoulders. Jungkook tilted his head, his eyes softening as he held her cheek. His thumb gently traced over the faint redness left by Olivia's slap. Does this hurt? He asked, his voice low and tender. Wine nodded slightly, avoiding his gaze. Jungkook leaned forward and pressed a feather light to her cheek, his lips lingering for a moment. Why didn't you fight back? He asked, his brow furrowing as he looked at her. Wine lowered her head, her fingers nervously fingering in her lap, much like a child catch doing something wrong. You were always cold toward me. She murmured softly. I thought I should handle it politely, but she wasn't listening. Her voice trembled slightly, and Jungkook sighed, reaching out to tilt her chin upward, forcing her to meet his gaze. Wine, do you know that I don't love you? Her eyes widened slightly, and she bit her lip. Remaining silent, she wasn't sure what to say. Jungkook let out a heavy breath, his dark eyes searching hers. Listen, Wine, I do. I just don't know how to express my feelings. It's something I have struggled with since I was a kid. Wine blinked, her lips parting slightly in surprise as he continued. I may not say it often, but you should see it in my actions. You're my wife, and you matter to me more than anything. Wine swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't want to cause trouble in your office. She hesitated, her gaze flickering back to her lap. Is she really your secretary? Jungkook's jaw tightened at the mention of Olivia, but he nodded. Yeah, unfortunately, but fortunately not anymore. Wine looked up at him, her brows knitting together in confusion. Because he sat firmly, cupping her face in his hands. My wife's respect matters a lot more than some secretary. Her eyes softened, and a small, shy smile played on her lips. Thank you, Jungkook. Jungkook gave her a rare, faint smile in return and leaned in. Need to thank me, Wine. It's my job to protect you. Always. Jungkook's lips quivered into a teasing smirk as he tilted his head, his dark eyes narrowing slightly. By the way, can I ask what my pretty wife was doing in my office? Wine froze for a second, her cheeks blooming with color. She laughed nervously, her fingers playing with the hem of her sleeve. I just made lunch for you and was waiting. But then Jungkook interrupted her with a raised hand, shaking his head slightly. Okay, leave it. His voice softened and he gave her a small smile that made her heart skip a beat. He leaned back slightly, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. Let's forget about all that. Come on, today I will make something for you. Wine's eyes widened in surprise and she blinked at him as if trying to process his words. You cook for me? Jungkook chuckled, standing up with her still in his arms before setting her down gently. What? Don't trust your husband's skills in the kitchen? Wine giggled, her earlier nervousness fading away. I didn't say that, but it's hard to imagine you in an apron cutting vegetables. Jungkook rolled his eyes playfully. Grabbing her hand and leading her toward the kitchen. Keep teasing, and I might just prove you wrong, Mrs. Jones. Wine smiled softly, her heart warm as she followed him. For a moment, she realized how much these small gestures meant. Even with his cold demeanor, Jungkook had a way of surprising her when she least expected it.